and he'll be talking to us today about Christmas in Cloisterham. Let me find Dickens, serialisation, and Edwin Drood's terrible timing.
Hello, thank you, Emily. I'm just hopefully getting my screen sharing working now. So if I do this, with the magic logic, you should be able to see a PowerPoint slideshow in just a moment. Well done, everyone, by the way, today on doing technology so well. It's our old nemesis, but we've done well today, so a round of applause for everyone there. Thank you to Emily and Lydia for inviting me today to do the keynote and for organising this conference, and to Deborah for technical support as well. I want to start by just acknowledging how absolutely crazy all of this is right now. Bless us, we as human beings are trained to act and carry on like everything is normal, but nothing about this right now is normal. This is me giving a keynote at an academic conference. I should be in a lecture hall in front of a group of people. Instead, I'm in my bedroom, terrified the kids are going to come in a second now to ask for a glass of squash. No one for company except for Detective Pikachu here to sort of cheer me on. So nothing about this is normal. And the day itself is not normal. It's 150 years since Dickens died. And I still do not know how we as Dickensians are supposed to be feeling about that. The bicentenary in 2012 was a much easier one to respond to. That was, hurrah, happy birthday, Dickens. 200 years old today, huzzah. But today, it's like, hooray, Dickens is dead. Still, huzzah. It's not really a cause for celebration. But then nor is it a cause for commiseration. We are, we're not really meant to be gnashing our teeth and wailing here. I think even the Victorians with their penchant for long mourning periods would say that 150 years is probably long enough to move on. So we're not happy, we're not sad, we're just in this sort of stoic state of ambiguous reflection instead. And then as if all this wasn't weird enough, I'm here today on a summer's day talking to you about Christmas. Christmas in summertime. What's going on with that? I know it comes early every year, but what? And my defense here is that Dickens started it. That the July installment of The Mystery of Edwin Drood is set at Christmas time. What on earth is he thinking by doing this? And as if that's not weird enough, during that Christmas installment, that Edwin Drood disappears or dies, depending on how you think the book ends. And as if that's not weird enough, it's that installment, which is the first installment that's published after Dickens's own death. So everything is wrong between Dickens's death, Edwin's death, Christmas in summertime, strange commemorations, Pikachu's in the room as well. Nothing is normal. The time is out of joint. Or to use a more sort of modern terminology, it's a snafu. Okay, situation normal, all beep up. And that's what I'm going back to again and again today, is this anxiety that comes from trying to act as if it's a normal situation when it is emphatically not a normal situation. And that is what's going on with Christmas in Cloisterham. So I'm going to start at the beginning, and the beginning is the end because, why not? 1870, the year that Dickens dies, the year The Mystery of Edwin Drood is first published. Now, I've argued elsewhere that we too often use our hindsight of Dickens's death to inform how we read Edwin Drood. It's inevitable. He died halfway through writing it, so we're conscious the moment we pick it up about Dickens's death. But that also affects the way that we read the tone of this novel. And the proof of this can be seen when we look at how the original installments are received when they're first published. They came out in April 1870, the first installment. And when we look at the reviews of that, the emotions are of excitement and optimism. The Times says the novel reading world have been on the tiptoe of expectation since the announcement of a new work by their favourite author. We have perused the first instalment and venture to express the public pleasure and to thank Mr. Dickens for having added a zest to the season. Now, I love Edwin Drood, but I would never think of using the word zest to describe it. That's exactly what the Times is doing. The Illustrated London News says that all the world is eager to welcome Mr. Dickens back to the domains of serial fiction. And so far as we can judge from the first number of his work, public expectation is not likely to be disappointed. Where has Dickens been to be coming back to serial fiction? He's been on his reading tours. It's been 5 years since Dickens has last published a book. That's the longest pause in his entire career between novels. So obviously everyone is very excited. And this comes through in the next comment from John Bull, for which I apologize in advance for the terrible pun here. But the writer goes, "Really, Messrs. Chapman and Hall, please revise the announcement of Dickens's last work. The Mystery of Edwin Drood? Of course it did. A work from the pen of Boz is always sure to draw. Please alter The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Ha ha ha, you may add, if you like, immensely. Wacka wacka wacka." Apart from the terrible pun there, what interests me here is Boz. In 1870, Dickens is still being referred to by the pen name he chose at the beginning of his career. He is still being viewed in that mode. It is uncontroversial to say that Dickens's contemporaries liked his earlier work more than his later work. They liked the earlier comic stuff with the funny caricatures. And there's always a sense of hope that maybe he'll write some more of that rather than the later social satires. So you see in the reviews of the Times and Athenaeum that nostalgia is the key note here as they're reviewing it. The Times is struck by the idea that Dickens has been writing for over a generation now, that young men who read the Pickwick Papers are now grown up and fathers themselves with their own children reading Edwin Drood. And as he delights the fathers, so he delights the children. And this, his latest effort, promises to be received with interest and pleasure as widespread as those which greeted those glorious papers, which built at once the whole edifice of his fame. Likewise, we see a similar tone in the Athenaeum. It's a positive pleasure to see once more the green cover in which the world first beheld Mr. Pickwick, and to find within it the opening chapters of a tale which gives promise of being worthy of the pen which sketched with masterly hand the course of Mr. Pickwick's fortunes. So in both cases here, they're referencing Drood back to Pickwick, which is not the obvious comparison we would make now. We'd probably compare it more to our mutual friend. But if we now are guilty of reading Drood in hindsight with Dickens's death, these reviewers are just as guilty of reading it with anticipation of it being another Pickwick. They're viewing it through that lens. They're hoping it will be another Pickwick. Please, some more of that early work, Mr. Dickens. And when they do review it, they pick up on the comic installments, Sapsea and Durdles. That's what they celebrate in that first number. And then Dickens dies. Spoiler. He ruins everything. And we see immediately the change in tone. There's a national outpouring in the papers, of course, for Dickens's death. But come July, when that next installment appears, this sort of ghostly hand from beyond the grave writing the story still, the reviews change the way they respond to it. So the Illustrated London News says, the recent calamity, sustained alike by letters and society, must be felt to exempt this latest production of Mr. Dickens from minute criticism. We shall only observe here that the present is the best of the numbers published, and that the story has reached a point of suspense which renders the question of the extent to which the author may have been enabled to develop his plan one of considerable literary interest. So we're not talking about Pickwick anymore. Now we're already looking ahead to the half that won't be written. The tone has changed. And when readers come in July to, for the first time, experience Dickens as a posthumous author, they're greeted with Christmas, which is like a warm hug and a slap in the face at the same time. Because on the one hand, Dickens is gone, but here he is, Mr. Christmas himself, gifting us a Christmas episode in the middle of summertime. At the same time, this is not like the Christmas we expect from Dickens. It is a merryless Christmas that we are being shown. This is how Dickens describes Christmas in Cloisterham in the July installment. And to go through this, the things to pick out here is, if we look at that first section, the focus on the performance of Christmas rather than the genuine feeling of Christmas. We see there that in Minor Canon Corner, with the Crisparkles and the Topes in the cathedral, are focusing on decorating, on putting up the show of Christmas. Rather than talking about their good spirits or good feeling, it's about going through the motions of putting up the decorations of Christmas. Then he talks about the commercial aspect. Lavish profusion is in the shops, particularly in the articles of currants, raisins, spices, candied peel, and moist sugar. He does say that there's gallantry and dissipation abroad, but that is evidenced through, again, the commercial aspects. Mistletoe hanging in the greengrocer's shop, and a poor little 12th cake, a very poor little 12th cake, that one would rather call it a 24th cake or a 48th cake, which are going to be raffled at 1 shilling per member. So in 1870 already, Dickens is talking about the commercialization of Christmas, about how it's all about sales and shops and the show of it. He concludes by saying that public amusements are not wanting. They are wanting, they're totally wanting. He talks about waxworks. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but Dickens talks about waxworks a lot through his writing, and every time he does, it's never complimentary. They're always sort of a sad reflection of what they could be. He also talks about Christmas pantomimes, the latter being heralded by the portrait of Signor Jacksonini, that famous Italian name, Jacksonini the clown, which is basically just Bob the Butcher putting on a wig and doing balloon animals, saying, "How do you do tomorrow? Quite as large as life and almost as miserably." So there's no real genuine feeling of Christmas here. It's performance. To go back to that opening line of the paragraph, seasonable tokens are about. It's tokenism. It's going through the motions of Christmas rather than really feeling what Christmas is about. And we see this also in the illustration for that July installment. Here is Mr. Grewgious by the fireplace, that classic symbol of Dickens and domesticity, the hearth which around we all gather for happiness and family times. And there's Mr. Grewgious warming his hands by that fireplace. And oh yes, there's John Jasper lying prostrate at his feet, having collapsed in an agony, having learned that Edwin had broken his engagement with Rosa. Merry Christmas. This is, believe it or not, Boxing Day. Edwin Drood goes missing on the night of Christmas Eve. There was a terrible storm that night, and the next day, Christmas morning, all the people of Cloisterham are gathered in the town, at which point John Jasper runs through the street, not saying, "You boy, what day is it? Go buy that turkey, take it to Mr. Cratchit," but rather saying, "Where is my nephew? Have you seen my nephew?" Neville Landless is apprehended and interrogated on suspicion of murder on Christmas Day. And the search for the body takes place over Christmas Day and Boxing Day, at the end of which Mr. Grewgious arrives in Cloisterham. So this picture in front of you is a Christmas picture. And it is also emphatically anything but a Christmas picture. It's a SAFU, situation normal, all beep up. Okay, so this is where we get that anxiety, where we're shown what should be what we expect from Dickens as a typical Christmas scene, but we are not being given that. We are being denied our own expectations. I mean, the Muppets Christmas Carol has that wonderful moment where Beaker gives his scarf gingerly to Scrooge to wish him a Merry Christmas. If the Muppets ever made Edwin Drood, God forbid, Jasper would take that scarf and be using it to strangle his nephew with. So this is not your normal, typical Christmas. This is Christmas gone wrong. Now, we've seen that fireplace before. It's popped up in the May installment, number 2. There is Jasper again, standing up this time. Well done, Jasper. And again, this is what should be a nice, happy domestic scene, and it is not. This is Jasper stoking up antagonism between Edwin Drood and Neville Landless. And throughout Edwin Drood, there are these moments where there should be scenes that are happy scenes, domestic scenes, family scenes, that are shown to be hollow and insincere and having discontent lurking beneath them. So Dickens is exploring this throughout the whole of Drood, and Christmas and the way he presents it is in keeping with that sense of everything not being quite as it should be. Nothing is quite normal. Now, to understand this better, I want to go back now to look at Dickens and Christmas. And you could spend 4 hours talking about this, of course, but we begin with Pickwick Papers. And this is the famous Dingley Dell episode that is celebrated as an early Christmas scene